Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Kenny. It's now 10 past 9. I believe we can now begin the session, and I see that there is very low attendance. I think it's because of due to the power issues and the water issues around campus and around Auckland Park. But I believe since we will be recording this session, we can just carry on with the session and we'll record it and we'll upload it for those that were not able to attend the session. Yeah, so before I begin, my name is Lawrence Asani from the RCD Capacity Development. Can you just please throw a thumbs up if you can hear me, if I'm audible enough? Can everybody just thumbs up? Okay, perfect. So again, my name is Lawrence Asani, and I'll be your moderator for today's workshop. So before I start, I'd like to thank all the attendees for taking their time to join us. Most importantly, our facilitator for today's workshop, Dr. Kenny, for his efforts and preparing for giving this presentation. So before I begin the session, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules. As I mentioned before, that the session will be recorded and all the materials will be uploaded on the model communities and all the materials plus the recording. So if you have any question during the workshop, feel free to use the chat box and I will indicate to the presenter that there is a question and he will be able to address it. And a feedback survey will be sent during the session. So this will give us insights on whether this workshop is useful and how we can improve in the future. And also please to provide some kind words for our facilitator. So before I begin this session, I would like to go over our facilitator's bio for today's workshop. Dr. Kenny Chiwarawara is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Johannesburg. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience in giving detailed oral and written feedback. He has worked as a writing consultant at 3 different universities for over 10 years. He consults with students across all faculties and schools, on-site and online consultation. Dr. Chiwarawara also works in the RCD unit as a writing consultant. So without further ado, I would like to present Dr. Kenny to present this session. Thank you so much. You may proceed, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, for that kind introduction. Welcome, colleagues, to the pre-registration journey. And I appreciate that you made time to come and to attend today. Lawrence, may I please ask that you take down your slides so that I can put mine.
Okay, stop sharing. I stopped sharing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And this is me. I've just put on my video so that you know who is speaking, but I'll remove the video shortly when I'm presenting. So feel very free at any time to ask questions, to raise your hand, or to type in the chat box if you want me to stop and you want me to address something. So feel very free to do so. Let me start now. Just give me a second so that I start. All right, so today we are looking at the overview of a research proposal. Just tell me, are you able to see my slides and can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly and I can be able to see your slide. Can you just give a thumbs up if you can see Dr. Kenny's slides? Oh, okay, perfect.
Awesome. All right, so today we are looking at an overview of a research proposal, but I need to just put it within the context of this pre-writing, pre-registration toolkit. And so we are on number 4 now, steps to writing the research proposal. So this workshop is the first in this series. And so today we'll talk about an overview of a research proposal. As you can tell, it's an overview, so I won't go into minor details or into the nitty-gritties of a research proposal. I'll just give a broad picture of a proposal. I do so because tomorrow you will have another workshop on topic, paragraph development, and research questions. And then on the 7th of August, you will have a detailed unpacking of research methodology, and qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. And then on the 8th of August, you will have a workshop on research ethics, and very crucial on how to conduct our research in an ethical manner. And then on the 12th of August, we then look at abstract and conclusion. And there are different presenters for these different workshops. And then workshop 6 on the 12th of August will focus on presentation development, how you can work on your presentation skills and how to develop that. And then on the 13th, the second from last in this series will be on public speaking. And Professor Robinson will talk to you on that. And then the last one in this series on the steps to writing the research proposal, the last one in the series will be on responding to feedback, whether from your supervisor or from a committee that decides on the progress of your proposal. I provided that brief overview because today I won't go into the finer details of a research proposal, but I'll touch on the overview of the proposal itself. So I'll give tips and suggestions as I go. You will see that I try to make it a bit informal, and I'll speak a bit slowly so that I don't rush through things, and also so that if there's any question, people can feel free to raise it, and then I can develop it a bit more. In terms of the presentation workshop, I will start with the 3 phases of writing your research proposal. I'll talk about what that entails in terms of those 3 phases of writing your research proposal, though, of course, this applies to all other kinds of writing. And then I'll turn to understanding a research proposal. What is a research proposal? Why do we need one? I think it touches on the importance of a research proposal as well. I'll then talk about the criteria used to judge a research proposal, used by your supervisor, used by a committee in your department, or in the faculty that you are in. So it's important for you, before perhaps you start writing, to think about the criteria, so that as you develop your writing, you're thinking about, how is this work going to be judged anyway? Where do I concentrate my efforts? How do I ensure that my proposal passes? There are times when proposals go for examination, and there's a panel that decides on whether to give you approval to conduct research or to go back and rework certain aspects. And there are times when people go through the rounds of going back and forth, not with the supervisor now, but with the committee. And sometimes it goes there 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and it wastes a lot of time. And so you need to think about the criteria used for judging your research proposal. And then briefly, we'll talk about topic selection, but I won't dwell on that because tomorrow, we will touch on topic selection as well, and the research questions. And then the format of a research proposal, the background, rationale for the study, aims of the aims of the research, the literature review, what that entails. And when we talk about the literature review, it's quite a tricky part of your research proposal and also of your dissertation or your thesis itself. And so I'll take a bit of time talking a little bit on that, just giving you some pointers on how to look for information and also how to present the literature review and what a literature review really is. And then we'll talk about research problem, hypothesis, I won't again dwell much on that, but we'll touch on it very briefly. And then the research design and methods, again, you will have another workshop on that, but today I'll give you an overview of that as well. And the ethics statement or ethical considerations, the chapter outline, and then I'll give you time to ask questions and to make contributions. Right. So let's begin then with the three phases of writing your research proposal. Now, you plan to write a proposal. And often we think a lot about the writing itself, but there is a lot of thinking that goes into the period before you start writing. So there are three phases to writing. We all know them and we all go through them, but maybe you haven't really thought about them in the way that I'm trying to present them here. But there are three phases, and the first one is the pre-writing phase. This is when you are about to get started. You are thinking about the topic, you're thinking about what you have to do. And then I'll talk a little bit again on that, on the pre-writing as I go. But the second part will be the writing phase. This is where you spend the bulk of your time in this phase where you are reading and writing the proposal itself. And then there's the post-writing phase. This is where you come back to what you have written. You think about what you have put on a piece of paper or what you have typed on your computer, and you're thinking about, does this make sense? Does it flow? It's more like a revision phase. And so we'll touch on these three elements briefly before we continue. So, and again, like I said, please, at any time, if you feel you want to ask a question, please just raise your hand or signal to the moderator. Sadly, I can't see right now who has raised their hand, or so I'll need to be stopped so that I respond to your concern. So Lawrence, please feel free to jump in at any time, or anyone can really, so that I attend to your concerns.
Noted, Doc. Noted.
Thank you. So let's talk about the pre-writing phase. In the pre-writing phase, this is where you do what is called task analysis. Now, what is a task analysis? A task analysis is where you consider that which you have been asked to do. What is the task before you? Now, if you're writing an essay, you would look at an essay. What is the question saying? What exactly should you write? When is this assignment due? So the same goes for your proposal. You do this task analysis. You are thinking about which elements must come into this proposal that I've been asked to write. What am I writing about? Which are the different elements of a proposal? There must be an introduction. There must be a research problem. There must be, you are thinking about that before you embark on the writing part. So this is the pre-writing phase. It's a lot of planning, a lot of thinking about how you are going to address or go about developing the proposal. What is required of me? And so here it's quite important to think about the criteria that will be used to mark you. So I touched on this already here. What is the marking or grading criteria? And it's quite important to think about that in terms of the marking or the grading criteria. You think about that before you start writing, so that as you write, you are making sure that you are addressing these elements that will be used to mark. So this is kind of the rubric. So it's important for you to check in your department. What are the things they emphasize? What are the key aspects that must be addressed in this proposal? It's important that you have a look at that. Who is going to read the document? And of course, you do have the supervisor who is going to read, the first person who reads the document. And it informs what you write, because you're thinking about who is going to read this, what information should I put. But also you're going to send this to a committee that is going to decide on whether you should continue with the writing, or whether you should pause and revise, or whether it's rejected totally. And it's rare for that to happen, but be mindful of that. Who is going to mark or to grade? And so, when I was still doing my own PhD, my supervisor used to tell me, Kenny, there are certain things I won't allow to pass by me, I will first make sure that I stop certain things from proceeding. So it has to first pass by your supervisor, and your supervisor has to allow it to continue. And then it goes to the committee that then makes a final decision. When is this piece due? So this is what you are doing in the pre-writing phase. When should I submit this proposal? It informs in terms of the time that you need to spend preparing. What amount of time do you have to prepare? Um, then there is something called the free writing. And the free writing here, anyone who knows what free writing is, who wants to jump in, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you want to jump in and talk about what free writing is, you're welcome to do so, because it's quite helpful to free write your proposal as well. All right, I'm not sure whether anyone raised their hand, so I'll just keep on going. So free writing entails putting down everything that you know about a particular section or a particular topic or a particular issue. You do so, it's a timed pre-writing technique. You are writing, but you're not really into into the thick of the writing part. You are just, it's to inform you to see whether you know what you're writing about, or whether there has to be a lot of research before you continue writing. Because sometimes when you want to free write on an issue, you realize you don't know anything at all. Or sometimes you already know certain aspects. So it's a timed, often a short period of time, say 10 minutes or 15 minutes. You time yourself, you write down, you don't concern yourself with the conventional rules of writing. So, in other words, you don't think a lot about the grammar, you don't think about the spelling mistakes, where to put a comma, you just to write. And then later you come back and try to perfect that. So it's timed, and it gives you a sense of whether you know something or you don't quite know anything. And then if you don't know anything on it, then it means you need to go and do some research on it. That's the pre-writing phase. Then you will spend the bulk of your time on the writing phase. And this writing phase is where you are drafting your paper. And in this case, your proposal. You are reading, but you are also writing. In fact, there are three things involved here. You are reading, you are thinking, you are writing. All those three going together: reading, thinking, writing, reading, thinking, writing. So you are trying to present a coherent piece of writing, a coherent piece of a proposal, and you will see why this is important as we progress. But in terms of a tip or a suggestion, and I do know that you are now you're about to get into your master's, you're about to get into your PhD. So you've done a lot of writing, you've done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking already. So you come in here with a lot of information already and practices that you already have. And so what I'm suggesting here is a suggestion. It's up to you to take it or to leave it. But sometimes it's helpful to think about, particularly in this writing phase, to think about what you want to say first. Because I say this because often we are told to think about the reader a lot. And so we always think about the reader, and it's impossible not to think about the reader. I already said in the pre-writing phase, think about who is going to mark, who is going to read. So we always think about that. But sometimes we think a lot about the reader, and then we forget about what we want to really say, the message you want to communicate or to convey to that reader. And so there is this approach called the writerly based writing. So the writerly based writing is where you think first. Primarily, you are thinking about yourself as the writer. What is it that you want to convey in this introduction? What is the message you want to pass in this problem statement? What is the message you want to convey in this methodology? You focus on that first and you put it down. It's almost like that free writing part as well. But this one now, you are researching, you are writing it down, but you're not thinking a lot about the how part it's written. So once you are done with the what you want to say, and it's a first draft, you see, this kind of leads me back to another workshop you had, I think with Dr. Tony. Dr. Tony, I'm sure he talked about the need, it was around time management. And there is a need for you as you are developing your proposal to be mindful of time. And so I said in the pre-writing phase, think about when the piece that you are writing or when the proposal is due. So if, for example, your proposal is due on the 30th of September, what you need to do, and that's when you have to submit it to your supervisor, for example, what you need to do is to think about due dates for yourself that you set for yourself. For example, you would say you want to have a first draft by the 30th of August for yourself. And then you want to have a second draft ready by the 15th of September. Then you want to have the final that you send to your supervisor on the 30th of September. So you see now you have three drafts now, the first, the second, and the final that you submit to your supervisor. So when I talk about first thinking about what you want to say, the message you want to convey, you are really trying to do that in the first draft that is due to yourself on the 30th of August. You concern yourself with the content, the message that you're trying to pass, and you think a lot about that. Then later you think about, you go back to that document that you have submitted to yourself on the 30th. You give yourself a day or two so that when you go back to it, you look at it through fresh eyes. You're looking at the same document and it will surprise you, it will amaze you, because there are certain things that you want and say, what was I saying here? What exactly was I trying to say? So here you are thinking about how it should be said. It's called the readerly best writing. You're thinking about what you've written and you're thinking about, will the reader understand the message I'm trying to convey? Will they get what I'm trying to say? These two elements are quite key. These, the writerly best writing, the readerly best writing. But I say, and I take a bit of time talking about this because I know that, and I'm going to compare writing and reading. I do know that there are people, and you know this as well, that there are people who are good orators, people who speak well. And sometimes you can just listen to them, talk for about an hour or two, and you really won't know that time has passed because they speak well. I'm thinking of someone like Obama. I think he speaks well. And so, they have this charisma and people speak, and there are quite a number of other people who are good orators and they speak well. They know how to keep the audience captivated. So they know how to speak. But there are some people who speak well, but when you check the content or the substance they are saying, they lack substance. They are not answering the question. They are not really responding. And sometimes you see it with politicians. I was watching something in the US recently, and this one guy was asked something, a question, and he went on, but he was not answering the question, but he was speaking well and everything, but he wasn't answering the question. So even with writing, sometimes it happens that you are concerned a lot about how to write, and so you polish the flow of the sentences, the flow of the paragraphs, but you are missing the what has to be put into the document itself. So it's important to think about what has to be said, and then think also about how it should be said. So on the 30th of August, you make sure the substance, the content is there, because I would argue the content is more important than how it is said. This is not to say that the how it is said is not important, because if it's not said well, it might still cloud or affect the message that is trying to be communicated. But it's important that the content is there and you are able to address what a problem statement is, what a methodology is. Then you think about, will the reader understand the message I'm trying to convey? That's in the second phase. And then in the third phase, which is the final phase, which is really the revision phase, you approach your writing as a reader. You revise the first draft in terms of the way the information is communicated. So will the people reading follow what I'm trying to say? Would they follow what I'm saying? Would they see the story that I'm telling? Because essentially that's what you are doing. You are telling a story and you take them through different moves as you tell your story. But there are times when you begin to see gaps in the story. then you realize you need to go back to the writing phase so that you beef it up a little bit and add more information. In the revision stage, you think about the structural conventions of a particular section. Have you been able to do that? Do the argument flow logically? Does it flow? There is a logical flow of ideas. Have I used linking devices effectively? Transitional words, however, in addition, if firstly, secondly, or first, second, whatever. But you have to do so appropriately at important intervals. If you overdo it, it becomes a problem. It's like signposting. If you are driving to Pretoria and you're driving from Johannesburg to Pretoria, you can't in every 5 minutes you see, well, Pretoria at whatever kilometers in every 5 minutes. No, they put it at important intervals at a particular place. They put it to say you are left with 10 kilometers, then you're left with maybe a kilometer or something, but it doesn't tell you all the time. I'm thinking about even the GPS now that we have. It doesn't tell you 10 every second, doesn't tell you, it tells you, then it stops a little bit. So you give those nudges, you kind of help so that there's a smooth flow, but you don't overdo it. Too much of anything, it becomes a problem. And then, of course, if there is any unnecessary repetition, you take it off. Then you consider the referencing, whether it has been done effectively. Have you drawn from a variety of sources? And I think I'll talk about that as well when I come to the literature review. Remind me if I don't touch on it, but I think I'll touch on this as well. And then a focus on ideas and concepts, not on people's names. And there's a reason why I say that, and I'll touch on that when we get to the literature review as well. There are times when people make this mistake where everything is about people and not concepts and ideas and findings that are in the that are presented, especially in the literature review. That's where the challenge often happens. And so there is something that they call a laundry list, and I plan to talk about that when I get to the literature review. So there is need then to recognize that you check in the revision phase, you see whether you've recognized the kings and queens in the field. So in whatever field you are writing, as you are developing your proposal, there are the key authorities. Those are, I'm calling the kings and queens. Then there are those who are writing on it, but they are not really the primary individuals. So even in terms of where you place them as you are writing, you need to recognize that these are key individuals. These are not so key, but they're raising an important issue. And sometimes, one can tell that as they're reading the proposal, they can tell that you don't quite know who are the key authorities and who are not the so key authorities. And I plan to touch on that when we get to the meat of the proposal itself further down. I'm about to get into that now. So once you are done with your own post-writing phase in terms of the revision, it sometimes helps to seek the input of an outsider. This can be your friend or someone who has been trained to give detailed feedback. So we do have this service at the Research Capacity Development Unit of the Postgraduate School at the University of Johannesburg. We are 5, and we provide feedback. Sometimes we don't know your particular issue that you are writing on. No one knows everything. But as we are reading, we can tell that I don't quite see how you're moving into this section. Sometimes you know how to articulate it in terms of speaking, but you didn't quite put it down on a piece of paper. And so it does help to send it sometimes to someone who hasn't spend time going through what you have gone through with the document, and then they can look at it and they can check gaps in understanding of the argument in how you have presented those gaps. And sometimes these gaps occur due to ineffective and inappropriate use of those linking devices that I talked about, these transitional words that are useful, but if used inappropriately, then it becomes a key problem. Any questions so far as I turn to the next segment? Lawrence, is there any question? Is there any contribution from anyone?
At the moment, there is no questions in the chat box. There is no hand raised.
Not a
Um,
problem.
yeah.
I had a professor way back who used to say silence is a sign of agreement. So if you are not agreeing or you want me to continue to expound on something, please feel free to just stop me and ask me. All
Yeah,
right.
and if they're mic shy, they can also just type it in the chat box, then I'll present it to you.
Awesome. All right.
Oh,
Thank you. Thanks for
okay.
that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk about the research proposal then. Now I've talked about the three phases of writing this research proposal, and you're going to be seized with those three that I talked about: the pre-writing, the writing proper, and the post-writing phase. If you go through those phases well, and of course that's where the time management comes in again. You might not have time to do all the three drafts because you left it, to the last minute, and you only submitted the first draft on the 30th of September, which you haven't had a chance to go through and to check and to see whether it's flowing. Then when your supervisor looks at it and they pick up some key mistakes, and it becomes a problem. So what is a research proposal? We are talking a lot about a proposal, but what is it anyway? So you know already what a proposal is, but I'll just briefly uh, touch on some elements of the research proposal. It's a planning document. It's a planning document. You are planning to conduct research. It's quite a journey to do the research, but you want to plan then. For example, if you want to embark on a journey, you would want to plan, right? Where am I going? Am I going to Cape Town or am I going to Durban for holiday? If I'm going to Cape Town, what am I using to go there? Am I flying there? Am I using road? Am I using the train? So you are planning ahead of time before you go there. That's what you are doing in this proposal. It's a planning document. It outlines your thinking about a research problem. So this part here is quite important. Of course, planning and thinking go together. Planning and thinking go together. So you're outlining your thinking about a particular research problem. What have you thought about this? And so when someone goes through a proposal, they can tell, and the supervisors can tell, and the committee that decides on whether you should continue with your research can also tell whether you have thought through this enough. So a proposal might be very short, the final proposal that you submit. It might even be 10 pages, but there is a lot of thinking that really goes into that. And I would, in terms of suggestions, now, of course, I submit to what your supervisors will advise you. But sometimes, instead of just because if the department or the faculty says you need to only have 10 pages, I would say when you are starting in the first phase, your first draft, second draft, don't confine yourself to 10 pages, I would say write even 30 pages or 25 pages because you want to clearly capture what you want to capture in detail. And then you trim it down, you consolidate everything so that it now fits the 10 pages that you are allowed to submit, or whatever, 10 or 15 pages. Because it really, though it's quite short, it takes time for you to craft something solid, because it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of thinking that goes into this particular issue. When I talk about thinking here, and I think I'll repeat myself here and there, but you will see that um, you are thinking, when we turn to the methodology, you will see you're thinking about which methodology must I use? And you're already thinking about alternative views. And if you're writing down, please, this is important, write this down, alternative views. So as you are writing, you anticipate alternative views and objections. The issue that we are faced with as researchers, as writers, is that we are not there often to defend ourselves when the supervisor is reading the document, maybe at night or in the morning during the day. You are not there. You are somewhere. You've submitted and you are not there. And when the committee sits to deliberate on your proposal, you are not there. So think about the kinds of questions they are going to ask you and say, you are saying you want to go to Durban, why not Cape Town? So already try to answer those questions before they are sent back to you for you to answer. So that's why I'm saying it's a thinking process. You have to anticipate what the people are going to say because the document is going to speak for you in your absence. So if you are going to use a questionnaire, for example, why a questionnaire? Why not an interview? An in-depth interview, a focus group. If you're using all the three, why are you using all those three? So think about what you are doing, where you are doing it, why you are doing it. You are anticipating all these questions. You are detailing what you plan to do because they're going to judge based on what they see, not what you have in your mind, but you didn't put on a piece of paper. So it's a planning document, a thinking document, but importantly, it's also a sales document. So it's a sales document which presents what is to be started, how it is to be started, why it is to be started. So by sales document, I mean that you are trying to sell your idea to your supervisor and to the panel to say, this is something worthy of studying. Allow me and support me to carry out this important study. So in the way then that you organize your chapters, you organize your sections, you organize your ideas, you do so with a view of persuading, informing and persuading and convincing this panel that has uh, authority to stop this project. So you are trying to convince them. I mean, you when you're proposing to someone, you're almost selling this idea, will you marry me? And they have to see, why are you saying you want to? Have you proven yourself, that you can do this and you are someone worthy of spending my life with or whatever. So you are trying to sell this document, this idea that you have to someone else. Now, what writing a proposal entails is moving from a research idea to a research problem, and you will hear a lot about a problem, and we'll talk about it very soon. So you need to gain clarity on the unit of analysis. What exactly are you focusing on? And sometimes when we engage with students, we begin to see that they haven't really thought about who they are going to interview. Who is the focus here? They haven't really thought about that. And when someone is reading, they want to know, who exactly are you going to interview? Who are you going to administer these questionnaires to? It's important that you state that, and we all understand what you plan to do. That's where the planning and thinking that comes in. So selecting an appropriate research design, it's key that you have selected the right one that helps you collect the kind of data that will help you answer the research questions that you have. And have you conformed to the style and the format of a proposal? It's one thing to know what to write. It's another thing to write it in a manner that is not accepted in a particular community. Now, that leads me to stop a little bit and just to say something on this, because I like to give suggestions and tips and hints. Some may find them helpful. One of the challenges that I think we have is that when we are writing, and myself included, is that when we are writing, we sometimes see ourselves as students. So as if we don't know quite a lot, we're just students. I'm writing to this doctor who has written a lot on this. I'm writing to this professor who knows quite a lot. And I would want to say that as you are writing your proposal, begin to see yourself as a researcher, see yourself as a scholar. And so you are a scholar and you are engaged in an academic conversation with your peers. Of course, some of them are more senior than you are, some are more senior than I am, some are a bit junior than I am, but it's a conversation that is going on. You are in a community. So as a researcher, you are joining an academic conversation and community. So it's quite important for you to know that, so that as you write, it's like when you are knocking on a particular door, there is a faint knock that you see that this person doesn't have confidence. It's very faint. Then there's another knock, which is too loud. It's like, are you the police or what? So you need to strike a balance where you knock, you are not overconfident, but you are confident. You have done your undergraduate degree, you have done your honors degree, you are now doing your master's, or you've done your master's, you are now doing your PhD. So you have some information, and as you write, you are engaged in a particular conversation with a group of people. So this then leads me to talk about why we need a research proposal. Why do we need one? Now, earlier, I mentioned that you are engaged in a particular conversation, right? An academic conversation. Now, given that you are in a conversation, there are people that have spoken before you. So you are part of a community of discussants, sharing ideas and building on what others have said, asking questions, contributing to this public debate. Now, given this, it's important then that your research is laid out for inspection and comment or commentary by others in the academic community. Remember, you're in a particular conversation, there are rules and things that are expected of you in this particular community. When we started this session, our moderator laid down some rules and some things. So the same goes in research. As a researcher, like I said, that you're a researcher, there are certain rules that are there. And part of the rules, involves you um, presenting your ideas to a select group to make a determination on whether this is something worthy of pursuing, whether it's something worthy of study, and whether you are going to do so in an ethical manner. So why do you need a research proposal? So you need it for a number of reasons. I already mentioned that it's a journey that you are embarking on, and so it's a guide that will guide you. You are going to Cape Town, you're using road. Which road? Are you going via Bloemfontein or Kimberley? And why that particular whatever? You don't just go. So fuel, how much do you need for fuel? You are thinking ahead of, you don't want to be stuck along the way. And so I've seen sometimes that, someone embarks on a project and then midway, they realize this is not feasible. It's a problem. Often, sometimes that problem stemmed from a poor construction of a proposal. They never anticipated all these kinds of things. Now, sometimes you might anticipate these things and still fall into a number of problems. But if you have planned through, if you've thought through these things and have planned, chances are it will help you to navigate this journey fairly well. So it's a useful document to you as a student because you know where you are going, why you want to go there. You've thought through this kind of thing. And so it helps you. You have focus in terms of where you are going. You're not going to Durban and Cape Town at the same time. You are first going there, and from there you go there, and all that. So it guides you in this 2-year journey, in this 3-year journey, sometimes 5-year journey. You know where you are going. It also guides your supervisor. In terms of the supervisor, when you're submitting something to your supervisor, the supervisor wants to see that you have put enough thought into it, and they want to see whether you have prepared enough and whether you are putting in the work, and whether they have some faith and confidence that you are a capable student who can finish it. And that's why, whenever you are into this program, know that the panel has faith in you that you can finish. So don't second doubt yourself now. Just put in the work. You can do it because there were some screenings that were done to make sure that you are part of this select group. For funders, sometimes they want to see whether the idea is there and whether they can fund this particular project. And then for the rest of the academic community, you are representing researchers. I said you are one of the researchers, so you're representing researchers. So you want to uphold the name of researchers, this academic community, but also the institution where you come from, the University of Johannesburg. And so it's important then that they check. Did other people check to see whether there is substance in what is being done here? All right. I turn now to the criteria used for judging a research proposal. As I give this broad overview, this kind of broad picture, I want you to also consider the criteria that is used. They want to know, do you have a clear idea of what you plan to research? Is it clear to you, or somehow there is a bit of confusion in the document that they are looking at and they see you are not quite clear about this, you haven't thought about this? And now it's possible that you haven't thought about it. And so they are also there to help you refine your thinking and say, you haven't thought about this. It's important for you to think about this before we give you the go ahead to conduct the research. Then they also want to know, does your research proposal have focus? I've already mentioned this. Is it focused? Does it have one main thing that it seeks to achieve? Or it is all over the place? It's good, but it touches on a number of things which are not possible to do within the time that you have. Is it a topic worthy of academic study and significance? So we are academics as well, and so they want to know, is there value to it in terms of our academic study, and is there significance in what you are embarking on? Now, do you demonstrate an understanding, adequate understanding of the debates in the literature on the topic? Now, that again touches on what I said earlier around joining this community of scholars as a researcher. You are entering this as a researcher. Now, are you aware of what other researchers have said? Are you aware of the debates that are taking place or that have taken place in this particular topic that you are researching? Because it might be that you are not aware, and so you are thinking that there is a gap here, and yet there isn't a gap because it has been adequately addressed, but you haven't read to see. So you will see that as I proceed, I'll talk a lot about reading, reading, reading. It's important to do so because it helps you, it informs you of what has been done and what has not yet been done or what has not really been resolved. Is the project feasible? Sometimes we want something that is so huge, but it's not possible to finish within the time. So is this feasible? Can we do this? Are you able to do this? Do you have a realistic idea of how you are going to tackle the investigation? So they are checking this before they can say, go ahead and conduct this. Is it doable within the time constraints? Sometimes, people write as though they have all the time in the world to do so. For example, someone says, I want to interview all the presidents that have stayed for more than 20 years in power in Africa, and I want to know why they have done so. Is this doable within the time constraints? Do you even have access to these presidents? Or it's something interesting, but you won't have time and you don't have access to these individuals. But perhaps someone who was once a president has access to these other presidents and so can maybe conduct that particular study if they want to do so. And then, of course, the referencing list to see whether it conforms to I've seen some proposals being returned because they did not adhere to the referencing style. So some of these minor technical issues, can actually have a negative impact on your journey. I won't dwell on this because I will touch on this again when dealing with the topic and paragraph development and all that. But it's important to think about a theme, something broad which interests you, something which is relevant to investigate, and think about how it has been addressed in literature. And then from this broad theme that you are focusing on, whether it's housing, then you want to think about a particular topic within that broad theme. What is the topic that you are focusing on, a specific issue within the broad theme? You can't talk about housing, everything around housing. There's formal housing, there's informal, so-called informal housing. Now, which one are you talking about and what elements of that are you really focusing on? And then you will see that it's almost like a funnel approach. It starts broadly within a theme, and then you go to a topic, then you focus on a particular problem within that particular topic. And this problem, and I've talked a lot about a problem. So when you're thinking about a problem, you're trying to address a gap in literature, a puzzle, something that hasn't really been resolved in the literature. Already, that means that you would have done your reading to see whether there's an ambiguity or a tension in the literature. And your research then is trying to then fill this particular gap or trying to resolve this puzzle, this ambiguity, this tension. So there's something that you are trying to do, that you are trying to add to our understanding of something. Where can you find a theme? Of course, in your coursework that you did some time back, in the literature. Maybe there's an existing project that is happening already that your prospective supervisor is conducting. You may want to fit within that, or your personal experience based on what you have seen, what you've experienced, and you feel you need to conduct a study to better understand what is going on. How do I identify a problem? Well, the identified topic within the broader theme must then focus on a particular problem. And I've talked already about this particular problem. You need to have a particular problem that you're thinking about. And in doing this, and I'm going ahead of myself, but in doing this problem, you need to think about what is the problem really? What is the problem? How is it a problem? You see, you're trying to show even the other people that there is this problem. And then you show how it is a particular problem worthy of study. What do we know already about this particular problem from other studies that have been done? What do we know? Chances are there are certain elements of the problem that have been researched by others. What do we know? Then what don't we know about this particular problem? What don't we know that then requires you to come in and to enhance our understanding of this particular problem? Finally, what are the likely benefits that are going to come from knowing this problem? And I'm saying likely benefits because you write this in probabilistic terms. Or it could be, it may, because you don't know as yet, but you are thinking about the likely benefits that we are going to get from this particular research. As you see already, it's a sales document that you're trying to convince someone that there is a problem here. And this is how it is a problem. This is what we know about this particular problem. But there is this other element we don't quite know about this problem, hence the need for this study. And these are the likely benefits that are going to come from knowing this particular problem. But you just need to know, though, that not all problems are researchable. So you need to see whether this is researchable within the time that you have. The solution then to seeing what is the problem you want to identify, it is to read, and to read. Now, you have identified a topic and you have a problem within it. What now? Now, you need to remember that the proposal writing process does not follow a linear process. It's actually cycler. You go forward and back and all that. It's just to remember that you go forward, you go back, and all that. It's important to keep a notebook for yourself where you jot down all your ideas and the development of your thinking. And I used to have a counter book and I would write down the date for that particular day. It's interesting when I go back now to that book and I begin to see my own development thinking about this particular idea and refining this particular issue. In future, you might even go back and see that you left some other key aspects and you may want to pursue them in future. Now, that's a lot of talking. I'm left with a few slides though. Would you want some 2-3 minutes break or you want me to continue? Hello?
I think we can just continue.
Okay.
I think it's fine. I think we can just continue. Yeah.
All right,
Let's
let's
see.
do
There's no
so.
questions at the moment, and yeah, there's no hand raised, so I think we can proceed and just complete. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll do so. Let's turn now to the format of the proposal. So there's the title, and it's important for the title not to be too long and not to be too short. It has to be of an acceptable length, and it should be able to capture what you plan to write on. It's almost like descriptive in terms of when we look at that title, we need to get a sense of what you're writing about. And often you have keywords that capture the essence of your proposal or that which you plan, that which you plan to write on. Then there's the rationale background. What is the context that gave rise to this particular study? Why do you want to do this? What's the motivation, and do you think the importance of us allowing you to conduct this particular study? Uh, so then you have the aim of the research. What exactly do you seek to understand? Where do you want to get at with this particular project that you are involved with? In some contexts, you might see that there might be different questions. For example, they might say research question and or main research question and sub research questions, or aim and then objectives and all that, and depending on what you are writing. And of course, later you see as well, especially in workshop number 3, you will see around the qualitative or quantitative, or whether it's mixed in terms of quanti more hypothesis, and then the qualitative more research questions. So you will see that as you progress. Then there is also another important element here, which is the literature review. And I had promised that I would spend a little bit of time on this. Well, the literature review, it's quite a tricky one. I don't want to say that it's an easy one to write, but if done properly, it's quite interesting to read, and it can be very informative. Now, the literature review, you are thinking about within which uh, context is your research located. You want to justify the value of your research project against the backdrop of previous research. Again, it touches on the academic conversation I was talking about. So let me pause here. You don't want to waste a lot of time reading things that are not helpful in your literature review, because you don't have all the time in the world. So you want to read the title. That's why even a title of your proposal has to be sharp, has to be to capture that which you're. So when you are reading, look at the title, then look at the abstract. Um, if you look at the title and you see that it doesn't really help you to, in terms of what you are looking for, then leave it. But if you see that maybe there's something, then you go to the keywords, you go to the abstract. And if you keep on seeing that there's something, then you go to the introduction. If there's something, then maybe you go to the conclusion. And then you check, maybe I need to read the whole article, or maybe I need to target these different, parts of the article, because you don't have all the time in the world to read everything. Your reading has to be targeted. Now, that's the reading part. Then you read, but you also need to write. Now, when it comes to the writing part, the biggest problem I see often in working with masters and PhD students is that sometimes you want to show that you have done a lot of reading, which is okay. But then the problem with that is sometimes you just list the scholars that you have engaged, that you have consulted, but you don't quite write it in a manner that the person who is going to read can see why you are bringing in these scholars. So when I come across such a draft at the postgraduate school, I tell the students that this is a good start, because in terms of the draft that I was talking about, it's okay to have that as a draft, but you need to now move beyond that and begin to to ensure that your voice comes out clearly. I read somewhere some time back where they say that the purpose of a literature review is not to build a library. It is to build an argument. I'll repeat that. The purpose of a literature review is not to build a library, but to build an argument. What I mean by that is, you, in a literature review, in your proposal, what you are doing is you are building an argument. You are showing the need for this particular study you are doing. And you are doing so by showing what other scholars before you have done. And you are recognizing and appreciating what they did well, what we now know based on the studies that they conducted, where they agree, where they disagree, where there are tensions, where you feel there's a particular gap. And you are showing that now there's this particular issue that has not been addressed or adequately addressed, or you don't quite agree with the findings here. And so you are saying there's need then for this particular study that you are conducting for you to feel or to enhance our understanding of this. I wonder whether you see where I'm going with this. So a literature review then is not just a matter of listing so and so said that, so and so said that, so and so said that. The question is, now we know what so and so and so and so and so and so have said. But what are you saying in relation to what these other scholars are saying? That's important. You are bringing these individuals for a reason. You believe they have something important to say, but you believe there is something that can be extended in our understanding of something if we conduct this particular study. So that's quite important. Um, there is someone called Sharon Clarence, an academic. Um, she writes about writing a literature review in your own voice. And Sharon says that often it's helpful for in your literature review, for the first sentence in your paragraph to be your own words, introducing a particular claim that you are making. Having done that, you then bring in evidence from scholars who are saying something related to that. But after that, you need to come back and engage with what these scholars have said. Where do you agree with them? Where do you disagree with them? So what? You kind of make some comments on that. Often I give an example on this, and before I move on, I say, it's, you see, you are the most important person in this document, in this proposal. You are. You as the researcher, the master's researcher, the PhD researcher, you are the most important person. And what I mean by that is sometimes, you hear supervisors say, where is your voice? Or you are now becoming a follower. You're just following what others are saying, and we don't quite see and hear what you are saying. That happens when you forget that you are the main person here. So let me give the example that I often give. Here's the example that I don't know how many of you watch TV or conversations on TV, and I do. I enjoy listening to news. And so in South Africa, Sakina Kamwendo, for example. So sometimes she has these talk shows. And so, for example, she wants people to talk about, she wants her audience to know about load shedding in South Africa. And so she may decide to bring in people that she believes have something important to say to the audience. But remember, this is still her talk show. It's a segment on a Monday. Maybe it's 30 minutes long. So think about that 30 minutes as this talk show now. And I think we'll touch on this again tomorrow in detail in terms of paragraph development. But in terms of telling the story now, what happens is that Sakina Kamwendo would have to introduce the idea that is to be talked about in that segment. She has to introduce it to the audience because at home, we know Sakina Kamwendo. We don't know some of the experts that she decides to bring. Now, in this case, say, for example, she decides to bring in leaders from different political parties. She decides to bring in the ANC, so President Ramaphosa, President John Steinhuis, and President Jacob Zuma, and President Malema, the leaders of the four main parties now in parliament. Now, President Ramaphosa is powerful, and all these presidents that I talked about, they're powerful, but this is not their talk show. So when they get to this talk show, they must keep quiet until they are allowed time to speak. But the host has to introduce the idea of that segment. So Sakina introduces load shedding continues to be a key problem in South Africa. Today, I've invited 4 leaders of political parties in South Africa to talk to us about why we still have load shedding, what they are doing to end load shedding, and when we are likely to see the end of load shedding. So you are the Sakina Kamwendo of your proposal. You have the duty to tell the reader who these scholars are that you are bringing, why you are bringing this. So you first make the claim, then you allow. So having done that, you allow President Ramaphosa to speak. You may engage a little bit with him. Are you saying this or whatever? Or you allow the other speaker to come in. You allow the other speaker, but you don't end there. At the end, you come back and you show us why. It's called explanation. You make sense of the evidence that you have provided in relation to the point that you are making. And we'll talk about that in paragraph development. But it's important to do so because if you don't do so, you allow, say, President Malema to end with the talk. Maybe he's talking about corruption and mismanagement. Then the next thing we are hearing, there are floods in Durban. Then we are wondering, how did we move from load shedding to floods in Durban? You then, as the main person of this document, you have the responsibility to guide the whole discussion. It's quite important. And if you do so, it will help in the academic conversation. It's not just a laundry list where you are just listing people, but the readers will be able to see why you are listing the way you are listing. All right. Then, of course, in terms of the theory, which lens are you using to analyze data, to look at the data? If you decide to use one theory, why are you using that one theory? What does the theory say? Which elements of the theory are you going to use, and how are you going to use them in your study? There has to be a reason why you are doing. If you decide to use two or three, show why. Maybe the first one does this, but it's limited in this particular area. Hence, the need for you to bring in a second theory, which then addresses this other part and all that. So it's always important to think about what you are doing and why you are doing so. The research problem, I've talked already about this. It captures the essential focus of your thesis. It's important for you to spend time formulating a clear and focused and interesting research problem. It takes time for you to come up with a very good researchable research problem. It really is the engine that drives the whole thesis. Everything you do revolves around this, because from this, you then come up with a problem, one main problem, and then the questions that are meant to help you address this particular problem. And of course, if it's more quantitative, then you do need a research hypothesis. And of course, these are the essential elements of a research hypothesis. That it should be reasonable, should be consistent with available facts and theory, it should be testable, it should be stated as simply as possible. And of course, you're going to have dedicated discussions on this. I'm almost about to finish. As I give you this overview, I also want you to know that research design and methodology is quite key. So you have this problem, and you are saying that there is this gap in literature and you want to conduct this particular study. How are you going to get the data to answer the research questions that you have? Where are you going to get this data? Which methods are you going to use? Why? So as whatever you do, think about detailing what exactly are you going to do. Are you interviewing people? How many? Where are you interviewing them? In terms of the sample, why are you interviewing them that way? Uh, so there has to be reason for you to do that. And you also talk about whether this is even feasible to do so. You can say that you're going to interview artists. So you're going to interview artists in Johannesburg. We need to know which artists are you talking about. Are they more, by artists, who do you mean? Are you talking about people who are movie actors? Are you talking about which kinds of people are you talking about, and where in Johannesburg, and why those different, why in those places? So it's important then to avoid being too ambitious in the number of methods you intend to use. If you feel that there's a need for you to bring in a number of methods, do so for a reason, but also be mindful of whether you will have enough time to be able to conduct that particular research. I assure you, this is my second from last slide, so we are almost coming to the end. The ethics statement, please check with your supervisor about professional guidelines in your field. And then, of course, dates for obtaining clearance. It's quite important to know that there are dates you can submit. And then often there is a particular date that, or a number of days that the faculty meets to deliberate on proposals. So when I talked about thinking about a number of drafts, you need to think about when should you submit, and you work through knowing the final date you want to submit. If there's need for you to be trained on something, it's important to do that. It's important for you to protect the identities and interests of those involved. That's where confidentiality, anonymity, and ethical clearance come into play, because many people have been harmed in the process of conducting research. So you want to show that you are mindful of the ethical considerations that one should take into consideration. And if you are interviewing people that are uh, below 18 years, you need to know that it's quite tricky. You need consent from parents, you need consent. So think about these things and see how you're going to address these kinds of things before you submit your document. In terms of the chapter outline, I think I've touched on all this already. In terms of the skeleton, how would the dissertation for your master's look like? How many chapters will it have? For example, it might have 5 chapters, one, the introduction, maybe the second one more, the literature review, excuse me, and maybe theoretical framework. Sometimes people separate them, or separate the chapters. In my case, I separate those chapters. Then you have, for example, a methodology chapter. Then you have a findings chapter, maybe findings, analysis, discussion there, or they're separated. And then, of course, you then have a conclusion chapter as well. So that you lay it out. But of course, in a proposal, this is what you're proposing to do. It might not then happen that particular way, in terms of it's not that strict. There might be changes here and there. So just be mindful of that and be flexible as well. But you also need to be communicating with your supervisor of any developments and any things that need to be considered. For example, sometimes in some universities, the title itself, if you change the title that has been approved in your proposal, then it has to be it has to be approved by a particular body at the university before you can just change the title. And so you have to work closely with your supervisor in these things. And then sometimes you need to provide a timeline of when certain things are going to be done. When are you collecting data? When are you doing the write-up, the analysis, and all that? You have all those kinds of things. So that's why it's really a planning document. It's a thinking document. It's a sales document to show that you have thought through things, you have planned, you have considered different options, and you have decided to take this particular option. But then you are now selling this particular idea and say, look, allow me to conduct this study because there is value in this particular research. We are likely to benefit 1, 2, 3 from this. It will likely enhance our understanding of this. And I also conduct this research in an ethical manner. And I will only conduct research once I've been given permission to do so. That ends my presentation. Any questions, contributions that you want to raise? Are there any questions? Any contributions?
There isn't any questions at the moment. Are there even any questions at all? There isn't questions in the chat box.
Not a problem. I'll just give a few minutes in case someone wants to say something before we call it a day. But I think as people are thinking about the questions, I think what I can just say in about 2 minutes, just stop me at any time if you want me to, but I won't take long. But I think what I want to really leave with you is that a proposal is not something you can do within a week. It's rare for you to be able to do it within 1 week or 2 weeks. It takes time. It takes a lot of thinking. So you need to budget enough time for you to be able to write something of substance. Um, I remember, for example, in the literature review, that funnel approach, you want to have an understanding of what is happening in the global world, in US, in Asia, in Europe, what is happening in Africa, what is, if you are focusing on South Africa, for example, what is happening in Africa, in Kenya, in Mozambique. Then you come now to your case to South Africa, and maybe you're focusing only on the Gauteng province, but you want to consider also a little bit about what is happening in the other 8 provinces before you narrow down to your particular case. So all that takes a lot of time. It's really crafting a proposal. So there's a lot of back and forth that also happens between you and your supervisor. And it's important for you to really read and understand the field, understand the key scholars, understand them, and engage with them and begin to see. It takes a bit of time for you to identify a particular gap. So take time, don't rush it, enjoy the reading, think about those alternative views, those objections that others might raise to say, okay, you want to conduct it here, why not the other side? And you try to provide a reason. If you are doing a case study, for example, why this particular case? There has to be a particular reason that is convincing, that we see, okay, you are doing it because of one, two, three reasons. So throughout, show that you have thought about what they are likely to think about and address that ahead of time. That will give you an edge in your proposal. But as you notice, you will be able to have other detailed presentations on a proposal in subsequent workshops. Thank you very much. Any other questions that are there, or we call it a day?
So people are just saying thank you so much for the presentation. They're saying that it was very clear, very insightful. I think you were very clear with it, Doctor. It was very precise and very clear and very insightful for everyone. And I
Thank
see
you for
that
the kind
somebody,
words.
yeah,
Thank you so much, the audience, for the kind words and for your participation and your attendance. Thank you.
I see there's somebody who's typing in the chat box. I think we can just wait for that question. I don't know if it's a question, but it's rather a comment saying, thank you, Doctor. It was a very effective, informative session.
I'm glad to hear. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Doctor, I have a question. So with regards to the proposal, is it always has to be a thing of how many pages? Is there like a specific um, number of pages that has to be in the research proposal, or it will only depend on your faculty and how long do they want it to be?
Good
Or if
question.
you, or
Thank
maybe
you.
if you include everything already, depending on the number of pages, as long as all the information is there, then it's fine. Or is there a specific number of pages in that sense?
Thank you, Lawrence, for that. Well, I must say that there is often a page limit. Often there is a page limit, but you do need to check with your department in terms of the page limit. And often there is also a template which they provide you to say, have this section, address this section, address this section, address this section. So for masters, there is often a page limit, and for PhD, there is often a page limit as well. But it's dependent on the faculty. But that's why I was saying that in initial drafts, it's helpful to think about what you want to cover and just detail that. And some supervisors actually do that. We sometimes come across proposals which have 30 pages, and they still say, well, the final one must be 15 pages or 25 pages. But the supervisor said just to write everything that you want to write, then we'll consolidate and reduce in terms of. So if you are writing now for yourself, think about first what you want to really capture, and don't be limited by the page numbers. But then later you want to then limit yourself to the page numbers. I know it's a bit hard to cut down on what you've written. It's as if you're cutting down, you're cutting a part of yourself. Uh, but it helps in terms of providing something of substance. But often there's a page limit for your proposals. Often there is, but just to check with your department.
Okay, now thank you so much.
I now begin to see the comments as well in
The
here,
chat
and thank you
boxes.
so much for the comments.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for the
really
kind
good.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, I think many thanks. That was an epic presentation, very clear and good to go.
All right. Sometimes it's easier as well to talk about these things in one-on-one sessions. So if you have any question and you want to have consultations, we have that service. We are five at the postgraduate school, five consultants. I'm not saying only come to me. You can go to any of us. I have confidence in all my colleagues, and they will be able to do a wonderful job. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Kenny. Really appreciate the very insightful, the very informative, and very clear presentation on the overall research proposal. And in that sense, I don't think we have any further questions. So I just wanted to inform the participants that just please don't forget to fill in the feedback survey, which I have put in twice in the comment session, the chat session. You can just fill it in so that we may get insights of the workshop and how informative it was. And thank you so much for everybody for making your time. And thank you so much again, Dr. Kenny. Really, really, really appreciate all your efforts and all your hard work. And to all the colleagues, thank you again and have yourself a very good day. And I will now be ending the session.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.